Your Excellencies, ladies and gentlemen, a fantastically warm welcome to Bold Talks 2014. Can I just say before we begin, can I just say as an aside that I've never in my life seen such a fantastic lineup of speakers at a one-day event. So please join me in giving them all an extremely warm round of applause. The great management guru Tom Peters said that if we spend our lives doing what has to be done that very second, just watch those seconds slip away. What he was referring to is the classic conflict between the urgent and the important. It's my paramount understanding that for all of us here today, one of the greatest challenges in our lives is resolving the difficulty, the clash between the urgent and the important. It's that clash that robs us of so much medium and long-term leverage and opportunity in our lives. For all of us who have ever done a management course, this is probably everyone in the room, the classic theme of every management course is how do we suppress, how do we take a step back from the needs of the day-to-day urgent to deal with the important? How do we leverage real change in our business and in our lives if we're trying to deal with 500, if we're fielding 500 emails a day? It's next to impossible. How do we take the longer-term strategic view for all of our benefits when we're trying to firefight the urgent? How do we take a step back from an intensive course of study to apply what we're learning in a creative and dramatic way? Today, this will be our quest. Now, I mention this topic because for every single speaker here today, every single presenter has resolved the conflict between the urgent and the important. Every single one has decided that the important has to be their goal. They have found ways of suppressing the challenge of the urgent, and they have delivered the potential of the important in its place. In the next 10 minutes, I want to take you on two journeys back in time which show us the nature of the conflict between the urgent and the important. And it's my view that these two examples change the whole face of the world. The first place I want to take you to is a freezing cold February day in the US city of Seattle, and the year is 1980. A young man has dropped out of Harvard Business School in order to start his own business. He dropped out because he had two fantastic pieces of client work, but they've gone, they were a success, and now the flow of new business has dried up. This is the first moment of failure he's experienced so far in his life. He grew up as a teenage mathematical genius, and in his SAT exams, he had the second highest score of all time, 1,590 out of 1,600. To this day, that's the third highest score ever. From the age of 14, he was fiddling around with the school's computer, modifying the curriculum basically to suit himself. He set up his own business, and now for the first time, he faces a crucial crisis of confidence. And one day in February, the telephone rings. It's the technical director of the largest computer company in the world. The technical director says to the young man, "I have an opportunity for you, and I'm told you are the person to deliver on this for us. We are creating the world's first independent, intelligent computer terminal. We're going to call it a personal computer, and we believe it will change the world. We would like you to develop the drive system for this machine." And he says, no. He says, "Thank you for the opportunity. That's not what I do. I write code." In fact, he believes he's the best machine code writer in the world. He's incredibly adept at Algo, COBOL, Fortran, and of course, BASIC. And he says to them, "If you want that done, I'm the person. To develop a machine, drive, that's not what I do." They're disappointed, they go somewhere else, and it's a disaster. It doesn't work out at all. 10 months later, they come back to the young man and they ask him again. And they say, "This time, we're asking you two things. We're asking you to source the drive system to your satisfaction and then to write the machine code to drive it." And he says, "Yes, that's what I'll do." Because he knows of a pre-existent hardware that can do the job very well, and he'll write the code for it. That's the decision that will make him a billionaire. His name was Bill Gates. The company that approached him was, of course, IBM. and they were developing MS-DOS. DOS made Gates a billionaire. Now, the reason he became a billionaire was because when they offered him the first opportunity, he didn't bite their hand off. He needed the money, but he didn't say yes, because he knew that would play to his weakness, not his strength. But when they came back, he saw a way that he could play to his strength. He privileged the important above the urgent. And look what happened. It changed the world. I want to take you to another place. We're going to a gorgeous summer's day. The year is 1945, and the date is August the 6th. 15,000 meters above the Sea of Japan, there is the most sophisticated aircraft in the world on its way to the Japanese mainland. The plane is called a Boeing B-29 Super Fortress, and it's carrying with it an atomic bomb. It's going to drop an atomic bomb on the Japanese city of Hiroshima. And in an hour and a half time, 90,000 people will be dead. The city of Hiroshima will be almost completely devastated. And within the next 3 months, a further 55,000 people will die horrific, excruciating deaths from radiation burns. How did we get to this point? Why is this necessary? Let's go back 4 years. The Japanese Empire had invaded Singapore, the Philippines, Thailand, Burma, Indonesia, Malaysia. Their regime is one of just indescribable brutality. 12 million people die as a result of the Japanese occupation. The Japanese then bomb Pearl Harbor, and America is forced to join the Second World War. In the next 2 years, there are 17 of the largest naval battles the world has ever seen. America wins 12 of the 17 outright. It then starts its land battles and is slowly but surely driving the Japanese from those occupied countries. But at an immense cost. America loses 1.5 million dead in those years. The Japanese lose 5 million dead. This is a war of immense cost. And the Americans have a problem because as the scale of the war is getting smaller, they're less good at fighting it. And this is a problem that will haunt them 25 years later as well in Vietnam. America is great at the technology set pieces. It will win those every time. The smaller battles, more of a challenge. And now they're approaching the Japanese mainland. Their logistical analysis tells them that to take the Japanese mainland will cost them 500,000 lives. 500,000 more Americans will die. And they reckon that 4 million more Japanese civilians will die in the process. But their calculations are wrong because we found out after the war that the Japanese High Command was prepared to lose 24 million civilians to fight off the Americans. That's what we were dealing with. That's the level of mass brutality that the Japanese High Command was prepared to lose. They were prepared to lose 24 million. Now, the Americans decide that the cost is probably not worth it. So they decide to firebomb the great Japanese cities with conventional bombing. They destroy the city of Japan. In one night, 120,000 people are killed in the streets of Tokyo. They then destroy the city of Yokohama next to Tokyo. But the Japanese will not surrender. They still won't surrender. And the Americans decide that a shock tactic is what's required. They decide to drop the atomic bomb on Hiroshima. They drop the bomb, the Japanese still will not surrender. 3 days later, they drop a second bomb, slightly less powerful, on the city of Nagasaki. Within 4 hours, the Japanese High Command surrenders categorically. The Second World War is over. But the rights and wrongs of how the war was ended are debated to this day. Nobody can tell you what was the right and wrong decision. We can tell you two things. We can say that in this instance, America profoundly believed that the urgent was the same as the important. And that decision has affected the course of world history ever since. I can tell you one other thing with categorical certainty. Since then, the atomic bomb has never, ever been used again. The profundity and intensity of that moment was so great, no one ever went there again. To this day, it's never been used in combat again. But to take us to that point required an immense misunderstanding on the point of both of the parties involved, on the side of the Japanese and the side of the Americans. Both sides had a kind of collective groupthink that's a kind of enslaved racism, that's a kind of enslaved commitment to really extraordinary value sets that simply didn't exist before the war. So if you visited America during the Second World War, it was full of extremely cheap and racist slogans and campaigns about Japan. But Japan was even worse. They enslaved the civilian population. People were forced to give up their sons and daughters to fight as kamikaze pilots, kamikaze submarines, kamikaze aircraft. Everyone was collected into the war effort. That difference between groupthink and personal think is profoundly important in world history. The group can influence the individual every time. That groupthink, that collective think, is also very important in a way that today we're creating artificial intelligence. Because artificial intelligence requires not simply an understanding of single psyche, but an understanding of collective psyche. It's that understanding that influences not only how we create artificial intelligence, but how do we interact with it? How can we as individuals literally speak to AI life forms, to robots, to intelligent machines? Our first speaker of the day is a world expert on this very, very topic. It's my greatest pleasure to introduce to you Dr. Nikolaos Mavridis. Nikolaos, please.